What is up, everybody? Sven Diesel here. We're going to be tying up the American Popper. The reason behind the name is we use a lot of American Hackle from Whiting Farms. So if you've never made one of these popper heads, this one's custom painted. I'll include a link here in the upper right that shows how to paint these, but let's not waste our time on prepping the head. I like to prep these in advance, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We have some Semperfli. This is a 6/0 wax thread in black. We have the Arex 2/0 TP 615 in the vise, and I'm going to lay down a little bit of thread base right there where my thread ended from the preparation of prepping this popper head. And then we'll go ahead and just lay down a little bit of thread here along the rear part of the hook shank. And the reason behind where I'm going to lay down a little bit of super glue here right there behind where if you watch the preparation video, I run the thread about I don't know, 1/8 of an inch past the end of the popper head here, so that now I'm bonding the two threads together. So the first step here is I love to put in a little flash. This is Semperfli's. This is their crystal flash in Krinkle gold is the color. I really love this stuff because of the length. It seems to be really long, and it comes in a few different styles of crinkleness. And we'll go ahead and cut off about 8 strands or so, and then I'll fold them in half. And I'm going to do it not quite on center. It's not quite in the middle. I'd say I'm about 3/8 to 5/8 in length. And I'll go ahead and tie that in right there at the rear, and then I'll do about 4 or 5 wraps over the crinkle gold so that it's tied in securely to the top of the shank of the hook. And now I'm going to taper these. I don't want them to be all the same length. I'm going to kind of cut it and at an angle. And if you really want, if you've ever trimmed a little bit of hair, just kind of pull it and snip it as you go, just as I did, and that gives a little nice taper. We have a little bit of flash off the back that's going to be the core of our tail or legs, however you view these. For the body and for the legs, we're going to be using some Whiting Farms. This is American Hackle. I like to use a few different colors, some as accent colors, but we're going to stick with the theme here we have of kind of a frog style. And you can see here, this one is a really nice feather. The length of the fibers is a little bit bigger than the hook gap, and so I'm going to save that one for the last feather. We're looking for some of these stiffer feathers because we're going to be making some hackle cones, and so I'm just going to go ahead and tie this in by the tip. And this is a process that could be a lot easier if you use different materials, but I love the natural hackle feathers that make these poppers. Just, you can tweak the color scheme so easily. I love using kind of, as you would call it, organic materials, even though most of this fly is not organic, but it makes it a lot more enjoyable part of the process of tying these poppers. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just wrapping this hackle with touching wraps around the hook shank and kind of trying to get as many fibers going backwards as possible. We don't want to trap too many going forward, but it's not something I'm going to spend extra time or waste my time trying to get those fibers back. And we'll go ahead and tie that off. You can see how we advanced up about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch, and that's just about right. And now we're going to make this little hackle cone by using our fingers to make kind of a triangle. I'm going to pull all those fibers back, and then I'm going to wrap up and over this hackle. And what we're doing is we're creating basically some might call it a dubbing ball. There's other synthetic materials that you can create this with, but those hackle fibers are stiff, and they're going to kind of push these longer leg feathers or tailing feathers that we're going to be putting in, kind of separating them for the pauses, because that hackle is a stiffer hackle. It's not a soft hackle. And so now we're going to tie in our legs, and you can see I just prepped it, and I'm just laying it here on the side. I don't trim out the rear, this section I'm holding on top of the popper now. That's how I align this, so you can kind of play with it, and over time you'll kind of get the feel and groove of it. But I want that feather splaying out towards me, and that hackle cone will help assist that. And so now I'm going to do the same with the other side, and you want to make sure that that feather is curving away from the hook shank. These feathers do have a natural curve to them. Now when it gets wet, it's going to suck all together into that tail, but the theory is on the pauses they're going to push out, and that's what we're really wanting. That's where I have most of my strikes is generally on the pauses. And so you can see how using that other end you can readjust that feather, so it's I want to keep them on somewhat of the top of the shank of the hook, but once we get them in position, I'll go ahead and trim these out, making sure they're nice and secure. Don't pull on them because you will tweak the feathers that we're leaving in. And now we're going to do another hackle cone, because I want to make sure I've got the body started really nice here towards the rear. And as we advance through this fly, I'll tie in 2 feathers at a time, but we're going to be doing I usually do about 6 to 8 of these longer feathers on the sides to form the legs. And we're going to progress in size here of the chartreuse green hackle to make sure that we're getting the body progressively going bigger. And this is a key step here. I like to put down some super glue once I get that hackle cone secure. And if you got any fibers that really annoy you, you can trim them out. But like I said, we're going to be covering this and making it super buggy, if you would, when we're forming the body. And this is now we're going to switch and go back and do one of these longer yellow grizzly fibers, and it's the same process, just pinch it in on my side. I like to tie it over where there's still a little bit of fibers, not that it's bare stem, because when you get at the bare stem it's going to be a little bit difficult. And we're going to repeat this process, and here I'm going to start tying in 2 legs at a time. That way it speeds up that process, and we're still going to rotate between the hackle cones and also adding those legs. But when I add in this chartreuse or the hot pink, I'm only going to add 1 as kind of an accent color, and that's just personal preference. Now I've started adding these legs right here behind, because this it's TP615 has a longer shank, so I've got a little bit more room. If you're doing like the 610 or a B10S, for example, you can pierce these through the popper head, but I've already secured the popper head coating, and so I'm just going to tie these in right here with some figure 8 loops. And I'm going to show you a little trick here on how I've integrated it into the body, because you see that spacing, you're thinking, well, you could have tied 1 more feather. Well, I've got a little trick for that, and so I'm going to figure 8 those so they're nice and secure. I'm not doing super tight wraps, but tight enough that it's going to hold in place. I don't really, these don't take too much abuse. They're not going to fall out. And I just want to make sure they're nice and secure and somewhat pointing out perpendicular to the hook shank at this point. Now, we're going to use that really large fiber. It almost has a little bit of a schloppen feel. It's from the back of the saddle. Super webby, buggy, fibers on this, but we're mainly going for the length. And I want this to kind of mat down, and everything else is going to push these out and form a really nice body. Now here's the little trick. I just pull these legs up around this head. I use one of the hair clips I stole from my wife, and now they're out of my way, so I can start wrapping this. You want to judge your wraps so that we get about 2 to 3 left before we finish. And what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 to 3 wraps in front of those rubber legs. So right now I'm wrapping behind them, and then here I've got about 2, maybe 3 wraps. I'm going to go ahead and release those legs and bring them back, just sliding that hair clip, and that will hold them in place. And now I'm going to be careful not to wrap those legs up and over, otherwise they didn't serve a purpose. But I want them sticking out perpendicular to the hook shank, and so I'll do about 2 to 3 wraps here, really using that whole feather. You can see how these fibers are a lot webbier than the first feather we tied in, and that also serves a purpose because these are going to not be as rigid. And so we'll go ahead and trim that out, and I'll pull as many of these back as I can. And we just want to basically make sure that's nice and secure. Do about 10 to 15 wraps here, and then what we're going to do is do two 3-turn whip finishes, and that will secure it. I'm going to use my bigger whip finish tool here and kind of just slide it over the head. It makes it a little bit easier. Maybe one of these days I'll purchase a a large one, and often I just do it by hand, but we'll go ahead and do a second here, 3-turn whip finish. So when we know this is secure, and I kind of buggered that one, but we'll do another one just in case. So and this will secure all this to the hook shank. You can put a little bit of glue. I don't find it necessary. It's pretty protected up in there, and we got a bunch of knots. And then the last step here is to take these Semperfli legs that we have in this this olive barred green, and I'm going to trim them to length. They're a little bit long. I want it to extend out just beyond the hackle, so a little bit longer than the hook gap. And then I'll take a bodkin and just kind of separate them out. I've tried a few different ways of tying this into knots and then having it up here as a hand, and I just find it's just as easy just to pull them apart and have about 3 to 4 legs, or mimicking the arms on this, and also pushing a little bit more water. But of course it's going to, as you strip this, it's going to suck backwards towards the rear of the hook, and then on your pauses it's going to kind of spring out, which is what the action why I put them on there. So you can shove them through the head, but then I'd recommend epoxying it after, again, so that you don't ruin your paint job by having water leaking between the layers. But there is the American Popper, because we used a ton of American Hackle. I like it. It's kind of in a frog color and super fishy. I'll fish it with floating line, heavy leader, usually a 0x, and strip it and wait for that hit on the top water. Tie some up. The color combinations are endless. Customizing the head is endless. And hope you have as much luck and as much fun fishing as I do. Appreciate you guys for watching. Make sure to click subscribe.